He beheaded wives, betrayed the church, and declared his daughters illegitimate, all to keep a woman from ruling the kingdom. But history played a cruel joke on him. It was his wives and daughters who changed England's destiny. Henry VIII, nicknamed Bluebeard for his 6 marriages and 2 executed wives, feared nothing more than a weak woman on the throne. Yet his first wife commanded armies, his second defied the Pope, and his daughter Elizabeth became the greatest ruler in England's history. How one man's love, betrayal, and fury turned England into an empire ruled by those he despised the most, women. We reveal the secrets of bloody marriages, conspiracies, and remarkable destinies that still fascinate historians. During England's war with France and Scotland, Henry VIII departed for battle in France, appointing Catherine as regent in his absence. When the Scots invaded English territory, Catherine devised a defense strategy. Troops under the command of the Earl of Surrey won a decisive victory in her name. King James IV of Scotland was killed, and Catherine sent his blood-stained shirt to Henry. The king's reaction was predictable. He resented his wife's triumph overshadowing his own, as he had not achieved significant military success. This marked the first rift in their relationship. Henry returned, and Catherine became pregnant again, but gave birth to a stillborn son. Then in 1516, she gave birth to a healthy daughter named Mary. The king was deeply disappointed and began seeking comfort in the arms of other women. Royal mistresses came and went. Catherine, as a dutiful queen, turned a blind eye. After the birth of Henry's acknowledged illegitimate son by Elizabeth Blount, whom he named the King's Son, Catherine bore no more children. She devoted herself entirely to Mary and to her faith. Stripped of her former role as Spain's ambassador, Catherine took on a domestic existence, sewing Henry's shirts by hand. She still dressed splendidly and appeared dignified in public, but no longer received praise. Francis Mudd of France called her old and ugly, and another contemporary remarked that she had never looked more hideous. Catherine no longer danced, hunted only occasionally, and wore a coarse Franciscan hair shirt under her royal gowns. She traveled often and spent long hours in prayer. She was only 33, but endless pregnancies and the deaths of her children had worn down her spirit and health. The couple had spent 18 years together. Dark thoughts began to torment Henry. The English throne would be inherited by his only daughter, Mary. Betrothed to the French Dauphin, she would place England under French control. Catherine was aging and unable to produce a male heir. Then came Anne Boleyn, the sister of Henry's longtime mistress, Mary. At the time of his courtship with Anne, Henry was still in good shape, though he had begun gaining weight due to his appetite for rich food and wine. His diet consisted mainly of fatty meats, pastries, and heavy drinking. Anne was not considered a classical beauty, but everyone agreed on her extraordinary charm and sensuality. Well-educated and witty, she'd spent 7 years as a lady-in-waiting at the French court, learning its graces and intrigues. Her lively spirit was the opposite of Catherine's calm reserve. Captivated, Henry began courting her, but Anne rejected his initial advances outright. This only fueled the king's desire. No woman before had ever dared to reject him. Thus began the grand love game between Anne and Henry, which would last 7 years. One day, the king sent her a golden whistle-shaped pendant, along with a tender note, "If you ride, I shall run." Anne accepted his courtship without enthusiasm. She wished to be his wife, not his mistress. There is no evidence they were intimate before marriage. Even centuries later, historians remain divided. Was Anne Boleyn a calculating, seductive woman driven by power and wealth, or a tragic figure defamed by Catholic chroniclers? Her story remains shrouded in mystery. Even her birth date is unknown. In various records, she is referred to as Man, Boleyn, or even Len. During her time in France, Anne began using Boleyn instead of the original Boleyn, a simplified pronunciation, and she often signed her name differently. Her appearance is also uncertain. Henry had nearly all her portraits destroyed. Only one surviving image exists, a small medallion. barely discernible. Historians believe she had olive skin, long black hair, striking black eyes, and a slender figure, features not fashionable at the time. The king had long been seeking grounds to end his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and take a new wife who, he hoped, would give him a son. After Anne agreed to marry him, Henry petitioned the Vatican to annul his marriage, not divorce it, as Catherine had given him no cause. He claimed to have only now realized he had married his brother's widow. If annulled, Catherine would be downgraded to Dowager Princess of Wales and sent to a convent, while her daughter Mary would be declared illegitimate and stripped of her place in the line of succession. The Queen resolved to fight for her marriage and her daughter's rights. For a long time, she was unaware that she had a rival. Her relationship with Anne, then her lady-in-waiting, had been cordial. The Pope, recently released from captivity by Catherine's nephew, the King of Spain, flatly refused Henry's request for annulment. For 2 years, the king tried to break Catherine's resistance. He separated her from her beloved daughter, housed his mistress, Anne Boleyn, in the palace near Catherine, dismissed all of the Queen's loyal attendants, replacing them with his spies, and intercepted all of her correspondence. Humiliated, Catherine responded with quiet dignity, praying and engaging in charitable works. Her humility only increased her popularity. The more Henry mistreated her, the more the people admired Catherine and despised Anne. Rumors spread that Anne had hair all over her body and even a 6th finger, like a witch. Henry VIII was the second son of Henry VII, King of England and Ireland, and the first monarch of the Tudor dynasty. The heir to the throne was his older brother Arthur, while Henry was prepared for the priesthood. A devout Catholic, he attended up to 6 religious services daily and wrote theological essays. But Arthur died at 15 without becoming king. When the Pope refused to yield, Henry VIII enacted a long-planned strategy, declaring England independent from papal authority. He founded the Church of England and named himself its supreme head. As head of the Church, he compelled the clergy to declare his marriage to Catherine invalid. The former queen was exiled to Bolton Castle, stripped of her jewels, and granted a paltry allowance barely enough for sustenance. Henry issued decrees forbidding her to be called queen or to communicate with her daughter. Mary was declared illegitimate, and Elizabeth, Henry and Anne's newborn daughter, was named heir to the English throne. Until her final days, Catherine refused to recognize any other queen but herself and continued to see Mary as the rightful heir. Initially, Henry and Anne married in secret, but when Anne announced her pregnancy, a lavish and highly public coronation followed. The future queen was carried through the streets of London in a gilded litter, while the highest-ranking nobles and barons held a canopy over her head. Her gown was dazzlingly white all the way to the hem. 3 years after Anne's coronation, Catherine of Aragon, worn down by years of struggle, realized she was dying. She dictated a will to her daughter Mary, bequeathing furs and a precious gold necklace brought from Spain, one of the few treasures not seized by Henry. In a final letter to the king, she forgave him, called herself his wife and him her husband, and begged him not to forget their daughter. Catherine confessed she still loved him. She died at the age of 51. Her death deepened the people's hatred for Anne Boleyn. Dark rumors spread that the poor queen had been poisoned. During the embalming, Catherine's heart was removed and found to be marked by a black tumor, fueling suspicions that her death was not natural. Meanwhile, the new queen lived lavishly, spending royal funds recklessly on dresses, hats, fine furniture, horses, and jewels. Contrary to popular belief, Anne did not actively participate in state affairs alongside Henry. She merely wielded significant influence over him for a time. The birth of a daughter, Elizabeth, bitterly disappointed the king. The passion in their marriage gave way to boredom and disdain for the woman who had once captivated him. Anne hoped to bear the long-awaited male heir, but suffered a miscarriage. Henry once again considered ending the marriage. He had already fallen in love with a new lady-in-waiting, Jane Seymour. Anne was removed from the royal chambers, which were taken over by her cheerful rival. Soon after, the king claimed he had been bewitched into marrying Anne, making the union invalid. He accused her of adultery and even incest with her brother. Anne was charged with having slept with 5 different men, allegedly 21 times over 3 years. However, later, historians proved that Anne and her supposed lovers had been in different locations and could not have met. Adultery against the king was considered high treason, punishable by death. Under torture, the supposed lovers confessed. In the end, Henry spared Anne the usual punishment of burning at the stake and ordered beheading by sword instead. The scaffold was erected near the White Tower in the Tower of London. Before her death, Anne swore on the Bible that she had been faithful and had never betrayed the king. It didn't help. The executioner struck once with his sword. A contemporary claimed her final words were of her love for Henry and her innocence. Catherine of Aragon, or Catalina as she was known in her native Spain, was born to Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, the first monarch of United Spain. She arrived in England at 16. From early childhood, she had been betrothed to the heir to the English throne, Prince Arthur of Wales. Because her father could not attend the wedding, Catherine was led to the altar by Arthur's younger brother, 10-year-old Prince Henry. Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, would go down in history as the king's most beloved queen. She came from an old noble family and had the blood of the Plantagenets, a royal house of French origin. Unlike Anne Boleyn, Jane had not received a broad education and spoke no foreign languages. She had been taught only household management, like most girls from noble families. The influential Seymour family placed her as a lady-in-waiting, first to Catherine of Aragon, and after the divorce, to Anne Boleyn. Court life offered the best chance for a suitable marriage and a secure future. By the time Jane married Henry, she was 27, and her younger sisters were already wed. Her late marriage may have been due to her appearance. Some accounts describe Jane as plain and unremarkable, while later portrayals depict her as a true beauty. Whatever the truth, it was Jane who won the heart of the King of England, 18 years her senior. He was still married to Anne Boleyn when he began courting Jane. She returned his gifts and letters, saying she wished to remain above reproach. Henry had already been through such a game with Anne Boleyn, yet with Jane Seymour he sincerely believed in her modesty and virtue. It is known that even before Anne's execution, the king had begun negotiating a future engagement with Jane. Historians remain divided on the true nature of Henry's third wife. A popular opinion suggests that Jane was the complete opposite of Anne, both in appearance and character. Jane was fair-haired, with blue eyes and porcelain skin. Anne, in contrast, was dark-haired, dark-eyed, and olive-skinned. Jane was quiet, demure, and obedient, unlike Anne's emotional, spirited nature. Whether Jane was truly an angel in human form remains unclear. It's suspicious that her engagement to Henry took place the very next day after Anne Boleyn's execution. Some believe her brothers stoked the king's interest to gain favor at court. Others argue that Jane knowingly adopted the role of the submissive woman, even choosing the motto, "bound to obey and serve." The birth of the long-awaited male heir elevated her status in Henry's eyes. Some accounts suggest she was 5 months pregnant at the time of their wedding, which would explain the haste. She later lost that child, and the truth may never be known. Eventually, Jane gave birth to a son, Edward VI, the heir to the throne, in 1537. 12 days later, she died of puerperal fever. Rumors claim that when doctors asked Henry whether to save the mother or the child, he chose the son without hesitation. Jane was buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Henry VIII declared Jane his most beloved wife. Before his death, he ordered that he be buried beside her. History allows for speculation. Had Jane lived longer, she might have bored Henry just as quickly as Anne Boleyn did. Her image was likely idealized. Nevertheless, it was Jane who reconciled Henry with his daughters from previous marriages, Mary and Elizabeth. By that time, Henry was already aging. He was 46 when Jane died, plagued by health issues. Numerous leg fractures caused him intense pain. Eventually, open sores developed, likely tropical ulcers, which bled and prevented him from leading an active life. Yet he remained gluttonous, indulging in food excessively. By the age of 56, Henry had become nearly square in stature. His body width almost equaled his height, and he weighed 177 kilograms. He lost control over himself and grew bitter toward the world. After Jane Seymour's death, the king soon sought another wife. European princesses declined his proposals. Stories of Henry's cruel behavior toward his wives had spread widely. His chief advisor, Thomas Cromwell, sought an alliance with another Protestant power to form a coalition against the Pope and arranged a potential marriage with Anne, the sister of William, Duke of Cleves. Henry was 48. Anne was just 24. The king agreed to negotiations but demanded to see a detailed portrait of his potential bride. The chosen painter was Hans Holbein the Younger, one of Henry's favorites, who traveled to the Duchy of Cleves to paint Anne from life. Since the negotiations continued, the king presumably liked the portrait. Whether Anne was truly beautiful remains unknown. Some sources claim the Cleves princess was indeed attractive. Interestingly, for the first time, Henry had to choose a wife based not on personal meetings, but on a portrait. The girl was extraordinarily beautiful and bore little resemblance to the typical Spaniard, with golden chestnut hair and gray-blue eyes. Chroniclers noted a strong mutual affection between the young couple. After the wedding night, Arthur reportedly told his chamberlain, "Last night I was in the midst of Spain," suggesting the consummation of the marriage. Yet this could have been mere bravado. There were no blood-stained sheets on display, no ensuing pregnancy. Nevertheless, the marriage was presumed valid. But then the political situation changed, and the king reconsidered marrying the German princess. Henry explained his disappointment with Anne of Cleves by claiming he had been misled by her appearance in the portrait. In truth, this was unlikely. The court painter, Hans Holbein the Younger, remained in the king's favor until his death, and even painted a celebrated portrait of Henry's only son, Edward, in the year of the marriage. A legend surrounds Henry and Anne's first meeting. The king supposedly arrived incognito at a castle in Kent, where Anne and her entourage were staying. When Henry attempted to kiss her, as royal custom dictated, the formal German princess recoiled. Offended, the king left. Later, Anne was told she had just rejected the King of England. An eyewitness account from a letter to the Duke of Cleves tells a more mundane version. Anne, caught off guard by the unexpected visitors, politely greeted the king's representative and invited him to dine with her. They shared dinner and breakfast, and it is unclear whether Henry revealed his identity. Chronicles describe the encounter. After he spoke to her, she was gracious and affectionate. She accepted him warmly, and he knelt to greet her. He gently took her hand and kissed it. They spent the entire day together in conversation and dined that night. Whatever truly happened, Henry soon wished to end the engagement, but it wasn't easy. The two had already married, although the union was never consummated. Henry declared that he found his wife's appearance unappealing. Some historians argue his dissatisfaction stemmed more from his own health problems than from Anne's looks. Nevertheless, the couple maintained the appearance of cordial relations. The queen gradually learned English and adapted to court traditions. She proved a kind stepmother and was well regarded at court. After 6 months, she was ordered to leave court and move to Richmond Palace. There, Henry's envoys informed her of the annulment. One reason given was Anne's prior betrothal to the Duke of Lorraine, a promise which, in the church's eyes, equated to marriage. Anne accepted the divorce conditions without resistance. Henry allowed her to remain in his family as his sister, giving her precedence after the new queen and princesses, Mary and Elizabeth. She was granted 2 castles and a generous annual income. Letters between Henry and Anne reveal that they remained on good terms. The king often signed them, "Your loving brother, Henry." Anne outlived Henry VIII, all his wives, and even his son, Edward VI. She never remarried. During the brief marriage to Anne, Henry had already chosen his next queen, a young lady-in-waiting, Catherine Howard. She was the cousin of Anne Boleyn, Henry's second wife, and a distant relative of his favorite wife, Jane Seymour. At the time of their wedding, Catherine was 16, while Henry was 49. After her mother's death, Catherine was raised by the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, who kept a kind of informal boarding school for noble boys and girls. Education was minimal, but Catherine learned the art of flirtation early. She first captivated her music teacher, then a young nobleman, Francis Derham, with whom she secretly met in her chamber at night. Francis proposed marriage, but Catherine believed she deserved a higher match. Her ambitious uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, arranged for her to serve as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves. Henry quickly became enamored with the lively, charming young woman. Just weeks after divorcing Anne, the king married Catherine. Enchanted, Henry showered her with dresses, furs, and jewels. Their union lasted only 4 months before Arthur's untimely death. Catherine was a 17-year-old childless widow. Henry's path shifted from singing Catholic psalms to preparing for kingship. For political reasons, Catherine was then betrothed to the 12-year-old Henry. She swore before witnesses that she remained a virgin, but refused a medical examination. The Pope, from distant Vatican City, confirmed that she had not been touched and permitted the marriage. The Pope knows best, young Henry thought. Their wedding would take place when he turned 15. What made her so joyful, like a child? The king was so enamored that he had a gold coin struck to mark their wedding, inscribed with the phrase, "The rose without a thorn," his favorite nickname for his young wife. But the marriage lasted only a year. The much-desired heir never came. Despite her efforts, Queen Catherine's relations with Princesses Mary and Elizabeth were strained. Mary, 9 years older than her new stepmother, refused to recognize her as queen. Naively, Catherine brought her childhood friends to court, people who knew too much about her past. The enemies of Catherine's influential uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, presented Henry with evidence of her infidelity, with 3 men no less. The king's reaction was surprising. Instead of rage, he wept and lamented his misfortune in marriage. After that, Henry and his advisers withdrew from Catherine's life. An investigation began. Her alleged lovers were arrested and interrogated. Her uncle Norfolk, eager to distance himself, wrote to the French ambassador declaring, "She engaged in prostitution with 7 or 8 men." The last time Catherine tried to see Henry was while he prayed in the royal chapel. Guards stopped her and dragged her away as she screamed. She was just a child who could deny herself nothing, said the kind Anne of Cleves, upon hearing the news. Catherine confessed to her guilt after being promised mercy. The queen and her supposed lovers were sentenced to death. According to an ambassador, Catherine behaved with dignity before her execution and asked for the execution block to be brought to her chamber so she could rehearse her death. Folk legend holds that her last words were, "I die a queen, but I would rather die the wife of the man I loved." Historical accounts suggest she accepted her punishment with grace, calling it deserved and just, and urged those present to pray for the king. Catherine Howard was buried beside the other executed queen, Anne Boleyn. To this day, historians debate whether she was truly guilty or merely slandered. Henry's last wife, Catherine Parr, was the one who outlived him. Before marrying the king, she had been widowed twice and had no children. Exceptionally educated for her time, she spoke French, Italian, and Latin, and later began learning Spanish. She entered the service of Princess Mary as a lady-in-waiting and fell in love for the first time with Sir Thomas Seymour. But by then, Henry VIII, now a widower again, had set his sights on her. When the king proposed, asking her to be his companion in old age, Catherine could not refuse. She had to adapt to his difficult temperament, made worse by illness. Among Henry's wives, she became the most beloved stepmother to his children. She brought them closer to their father and even persuaded Henry to restore Mary and Elizabeth's status as legitimate heirs, paving the way for their eventual reigns. After the premature death of their brother Edward VI, this act proved crucial. Even before her marriage, Catherine had been appointed by her father as Spain's official envoy to the English court. making her the first female ambassador in European history. A year after their marriage, Henry went off to conquer Boulogne, leaving Catherine as regent. She governed the kingdom with success. It was during this time that young Princess Elizabeth realized a woman could rule a nation and command men. After 4 years of marriage, King Henry VIII died. The young Edward VI was crowned just days later. Catherine withdrew from court to her London estate. In his will, Henry ordered that his last wife be granted a generous annual allowance of $7,000 and gave his blessing for her to remarry if she wished. At last, Catherine Parr married for love. She became the wife of Thomas Seymour. Their union lasted only a year and a half. Catherine died of puerperal fever at the age of 36, never having seen her newborn daughter, Mary. And so, the final note of this story may be this. History revealed to Henry its demonic grimace. He misjudged women. He underestimated them. And yet, it was women who ruled the Kingdom of England after him. Soon after, Henry VII died, and Henry VIII ascended the throne. In 1509, the 17-year-old king married the 23-year-old Catherine and was crowned at Westminster Abbey. Unlike his older brother, Henry was a healthy, athletic young man. Based on his physical prowess at 20, a standard portrait of the king was created. He stood 183 centimeters tall, weighed 95 kilograms, had an 81-centimeter waist, and a 99-centimeter chest. Contemporary descriptions praised his shapely legs. The enthusiastic Lord Mountjoy wrote, "Our king seeks not gold or gems or precious metals, but virtue, glory, and immortality." Foreign envoys, too, showered the young king with praise. Despite the unusual circumstances surrounding his marriage to Catherine, they developed a warm and loving relationship. Just 5 months after the wedding, joyful news spread across the court. The Queen was expecting a child. However, the first and second pregnancies ended in heartbreak. The third child was a long-awaited boy named Henry, but he died 2 months after birth, crushing hopes for an heir. Catherine, no longer young, turned to prayer in her grief. Henry began to pity himself, wondering why he had angered God. Still, the couple did not quarrel. Despite dashed hopes, their relationship remained respectful and affectionate. They shared many interests. Both loved reading, admired the arts, and were fascinated by science. They corresponded with Erasmus of Rotterdam, the renowned humanist and leading scholar of the era. They also shared a passion for fashion and entertainment. Both were skilled riders and passionate hunters. Catherine's calm temperament balanced Henry's volatile nature. She became his trusted advisor in state matters, which the young king often